Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Sami Jimen Marrero from Urbander, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from UdoU. Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to have a guest from the West Coast, and that's the beauty of these virtual connections. Today with us, Eduardo Caballero. Welcome, Eduardo. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Sammy. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, absolutely. He's the executive director and co-founder of EdVenture, or EDMO, and there's a story behind that, right? It's really it's an educational program for children for after school and also during the summer months when they're off, right, and not plugged into some kind of educational platform, so that way they can really develop their STEAM skills. But it's more than that, and you're gonna educate me about SEL, and we're gonna dive deep into this conversation. But tell me first, Eduardo, how and why was this developed, and a little bit about your background and why you decided to co-found Adventure, and why the change to Edmo, because I know the story, and I think it's awesome that you just embraced it.
Sure. Well, I'm one of those lifelong out of school time learning folks. I grew up in summer camps. Both my parents were working parents. And so every summer my parents sent me to the park and rec day camp, and I loved it. And then once I got to a certain age, when I was too old to be a camper, my mother volunteered me to be a volunteer. She said, "Put him to work. I need him to put him somewhere safe and fun." So and then I just never left. I mean, I just fell in love with summer, and my dream was always to one day have my own summer camp. And I love the fact that you could learn and meet new people. Like when I went to my park and rec camp, I had totally new group of friends. I could be somebody totally different than who I was known for, like at school, right? And
Yeah.
so there I really built my confidence, built new relationships, new friendships. So I saw the power of it in a lot of different ways of the magic of summer. So when my partner and I co-founded it back in 2004, I thought it was clever, and I come up with the name Adventure More, and where education meets adventure, and so I thought, okay, that'd be a cute name. But it actually turned out to be kind of hard to make songs with it, and the kids, it was a little hard for them to remember Adventure More, and so within a couple years, kids just started calling us Edmo as a nickname, and that actually proved to be a lot easier to make some cheers and chants with.
Yes,
So yeah, we stuck with it.
absolutely. Yeah, totally. And I love it because you listen to your audience, right? That's about, it's kind of like the marketing aspect of it, right? It's like if your target audience is telling you how they want to be called, then just run with it, right? And
Yeah.
that's it. I think it's fantastic. I love that story because sometimes it's that simple. Just listen to people, right? And adopt new ideas, and don't be so tied up to your branding or whatever. But that's like a business, that's a whole business episode, and we're here to talk about impact and about really providing an outlet for kids to experience STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, right? And I love how you included the arts in there. It's so important and vital to humanity, right? But this concept of SEL, can you talk to me about SEL, what it stands for? Because it's really at the core of your programming and how you operate, basically.
Absolutely. So SEL stands for social emotional learning, and it's that's the easy that's the easy answer. After that, it starts getting real messy real fast, because there's a ton of different frameworks, a lot of different definitions of what's included, what are those social emotional learning skills. So the big granddaddy of them all there's a CASEL. It's called CASEL, CASEL. Also has an acronym for something. But that's kind of the granddaddy framework. If folks are really interested, start there. We at EDMO, we worked with the UC Berkeley Greater Good Science Center to help us make sense of what is social emotional learning, what's the difference between SEL skills, character traits, mindsets, mindfulness. There's all these words floating around and it's hard to make sense of it all. So we basically boiled it down into the 6 SEL skills that we focus on at EDMO. We call them the recipe skills. And they are, recipe is an acronym. There's lots of acronyms in this field. So recipe stands for responsibility, empathy, collaboration, initiative, problem solving, and emotion management. And so these 6 skills, if kids can learn these skills, that will help them no matter what they end up doing in life. So if you're building a rocket or designing a city or doing a coding program, if you're building these skills in the kids through that project, if you're building responsibility and empathy and collaboration through that project, that skill is going to help them no matter what they end up doing in life, whether they end up becoming a teacher or a doctor or a librarian, doesn't matter. Those life skills will help you in your life. And ideally, you're also using those skills to encourage kids to make the world a more better and more equitable place too. It's not just about what you get out of it by building these skills. Like, what are you going to do now to make the world a better place with these skills?
That's awesome. And so it's almost like these camps and these after school programs that you've designed, okay, around this concept of social emotional learning. It's really a space, a safe space, so they can learn STEAM. Yes, absolutely. But more importantly, learn how to interact with each other. And like, I get you, I see you, that kind of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially right now with the pandemic, there's been so much more of a recognition of the importance of social emotional learning skills, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how is a child going to learn math or reading if they're dealing with trauma at home or if they're dealing with emotions of anxiety or depression? Like, you've got to be able to work with the emotions first and build the child's capacity and strength and resiliency in order for them to learn, right? And so and now there's educators realize this, definitely school districts, everyone's implementing SEL frameworks and activities into their programs, making time for kids to just talk about how they're feeling before you go into lesson plans.
Mm-hmm.
Really taking that time to recognize, hey, we're not just robots here. Like, you can't just stick information in kids' heads. You got to recognize who they are when they're coming in the door. So in that same vein, then you start getting into that equity work too with SEL.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm happy to talk about that as well, because you can have a very white normative frame on SEL and have, like, say, one definition of what does responsibility look like or what does emotion management look like. But once
Mm-hmm.
you get into cultural identity and once you get to understand the child, those definitions can change, right? And it can really vary depending on the child. Like, in one
Mm-hmm.
culture, maybe being loud and expressive when you have an emotion is natural, right? Like, I know my
Yeah.
house, my father's Colombian, my mother's Italian. We talk with our hands, we say things loudly, right? If my mom was over, just like, hey, if you got something to say it, get it out, don't hold it in. So, again, you got to take into account the context and again, of where the child was raised or who that person is and meet them where they're at. And maybe emotion management or emotional awareness looks different for different folks. Same with
Yes,
responsibility.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally, totally. It's very nuanced because it has to do with each individual is, the experiences that they've had, the cultures that they were born into, right? And even down to the zip code that they were born into too, right? So then I mean, there's just so many contextual factors that have a weigh in into how to address social emotional learning. And so I know that you've expanded because this you've been doing this for a while now, right?
18 years
It's
now. Yes.
yeah, is that I think that's awesome. That's fantastic. And so then now you're in not just in some areas in California, but you've also ventured out into other states, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So we started in California in the San Francisco Bay Area. with one site. And now we've grown to, last summer we had 47 camp locations across California and Texas. And we're now starting the next 3 to 5 years, we'll be expanding into more states as well. One positive of the pandemic was it also forced us to go online and create virtual summer camp experiences and after school programs.
Yeah.
And by going online, we were one of the first, if not the first, summer camp in the country to go online. We started doing online camp programs back in March of 2020. So we did get some public recognition from that. We actually got featured on the Today Show. And then next thing you know, we had kids from 47 states who were logging into our online summer camp programs and after school programs. So you had kids from like East Oakland with kids from Connecticut, kids from, Tallahassee, it's like all together in the same room, creating things in Minecraft and doing SEL activities, talking about their emotions and feelings. I mean, it was incredible. So we've continued on with those online programs in addition to our in-person programs.
I think that's fantastic. And when are you coming to Florida? But anyway, that what we have to talk offline to figure this out, because I'm going to tell you something. As a parent of a middle school child, and my son's now just started high school, we've been like that yo-yo. We've been that yo-yo family, like in person, virtual, in person again, virtual, for the past 2 years, and it's getting old. And the thing is, and let's just be frank, the education system here in the United States has been broken for a long time, because we're technology, we're going into the fourth industrial revolution, right? It's like we're moving so fast with technology, and the way the available options that people have to learn based on their preferences too, right? So this cookie cutter approach to teaching and to learning kind of doesn't apply, and has been obsolete for quite a minute, right? And so the thing is, I almost feel like the pandemic kind of pushed us over the ledge in realizing that, and the system that was already broken, now it's like into pieces. It's shattered, right? So what do we do now? And so then, to me, having met you through a common friend and colleague, right, it was such a breath of fresh air to know that there's programs out there already taking place that have demonstrated, that they can yield positive results, that they can actually help students, because what you are, when even these they're still students, right? Because they're learning, it's in the learning environment, and that there is a different way that is less restrictive, and that really allows each child to develop fully, right, their interests, and to really able to share in a safe space who they are, without judgment, and with all of the resources that they need to really flourish. And so, was that by? I'm assuming that that was by design. But do you see this type of model as a solution? Because I see it just talking to you, briefly already as a possible model to really scale and create a new way to teach and educate future generations, that's really more aligned with where we're going, and kind of abandons, old models that are not as effective anymore.
Yeah, well, I feel like every year we do get asked by at least one parent, will you start a school already? Like, can we sign for EDMO school, EDMO Elementary? We're not getting into that field, not anytime soon yet. Maybe that'll be the 10 to 20-year plan. But you do see there is more of a movement in some communities around community schools, where schools are looking at a child and the family in a holistic way, and saying like, okay, what are all the supports we need for this child and this family to thrive, and working all those supports into the school. So having health services, having medical services, having nutritional services, having enrichment services, and having folks work together to create that whole child experience, because no one person is going to be, or one institution can do it alone. We can't be an expert in everything, right? I mean, schools can you have a hard time just teaching them math, reading, and those basics. Like then asking them to also be experts in enrichment and hands-on learning it's a lot to put on folks.
Mhm.
But if we work together in collaboration with schools, I think, and leverage all of our strengths, then we can actually make a program that is both seamless and is able to support a child in all the different ways that they're going to need help. Because if we are going to do equity in the education space, you do have to recognize there's a lot of different factors that are going to
Mhm.
impact a child's performance in school, right?
Yes.
Kids hungry,
Yeah.
they're probably not going to do well in math and reading, right? So you got to have nutrition in there. I can't provide nutrition, but maybe someone else can, right?
Yes.
After school, some kids, we know there's a ton of inequity in the out of school time space. Like you
Yes.
mentioned, there was programs like EDMO and other ones, great programs all around the country that have all these incredible enrichment activities where kids can explore their passions, things like coding or making movies or animations, and those things turn into careers for some of our kids. And
Mhm.
I know because we've been here for 18 years, and I actually know some of our kids are actually now filmmakers. It's pretty crazy. I realize how old I am now, but 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 not everyone has access to those kinds of programs, right? So while
Mhm.
some kids they get the exposure to that in the summertime, other kids get nothing, right? They're sitting at
Mhm.
home, maybe they're being just cared for by an older sibling, and they're watching TV, and they're not doing those kinds of enrichment activities. So I think now there is more of an awareness of how much inequity exists in the out of school time space. I think that's been another thing that the pandemic has really shown a light on. Like even the federal government has increased funding for out of school time
Mhm.
experiences. I know in California here, the state is on top of the federal funding has dedicated another $4.6 billion towards after school and summer programs because it recognizes how much inequity there is in that space. So
Mhm.
I think there is a movement more towards like funding this kind of learning and education because people do recognize that it is important and it's integral to a child's education.
Yes, definitely, and I totally agree. It's the equity part, right? That is so important here, and that is lacking. And I just feel so. For clarification, so EDMO is a nonprofit, though, right? Yeah. And
Yes.
so that's the challenge too, is securing the funding to be able to amplify this work and to be able to reach more people. Is it has it been a uphill battle for you, or do you feel that now with the exposure that you've received and the results, because you're very results driven, right? Like this is I'm sure your storytelling is amazing, that you're really able to present case studies to really garner the support you need, or do you find that there's so much more that you can do if you're able to secure more funding?
All right, you're gonna get me rolling now. So
Yes.
um, when we started EDMO, when my partner Sharon Moore and I co-founded it. Um, we actually came from a for-profit background. We had both worked for an after-school tutoring company run by Kaplan. So we
Mhm.
understood how to do, balance sheets and go, okay, you get this many people enroll, you have this much money, you hire this much staff, you're good to go. We didn't
Right.
understand the nonprofit world, this world of where you go, let me send off a grant, wait for 6 months to a year maybe, and hopefully I get it. And I have to apply for 20 different grants to maybe get one. Like we were like, we will never get off the ground if we go this route. So even
Right.
though we incorporated as a nonprofit, because we knew we wanted to be a force for equity,
Hmm.
at the beginning, we had to make the dollars and cents make sense, right? So we
Hmm.
started with a fee-based model. So in a lot of ways, EDMO we're almost like a hybrid. We have fee-based programs that are very similar to what a for-profit program might be structured as, where families
Hmm.
pay $350 to $500 a week for camp.
Hmm.
And for many years, that's the first few years that what we did is we had those fee-paying families, and then we offered scholarships and financial aid to families who could afford it. And we said,
Hmm.
once we're sustainable, then we'll start applying for these grants and things that show up that fall from the sky, every six
Right.
months or whatever. So,
Yeah.
so that was the model. So we share the challenges with business folks. We know that challenge, and we also know that how we were contributing to a system of inequity as well. Because when you have a system like that, what happens? Families who have money, they get into the programs first. And I think there's a version of this in every business, right? You've got
Yes.
you got the money, you get in the door, no questions asked, right? But now if you need financial aid, you need to fill out a form. You need to tell me how much you make. You need to tell me a story about what your child and your family and what's going on. Hey, you know what you also need to do is you have to have a letter of recommendation from your teacher. So you have someone else vouching for you. And I mean, we had all these things we put into this financial aid system to be equitable. And we actually use the word equity. And that at that
Mhm.
time, you know, like
Yeah.
we're champions for equity. And then it had all this stuff. And now we look back on them and go, oh my God, like we created systems of inequity, like even with the banner of equity. And I see it
Yeah.
now in corporations misusing the word because I misused the word myself. That wasn't
Mm-hmm.
equity. We created way more hoops for people who needed that help. And if anything, we were making it really hard on those families. So in the last few years, we've been trying to figure out how to internally, because a lot of times when you think of inequity, you're like, oh man, it's this big thing out there that what can I do about it? Well, just start, right with your own organization or your own life. And for us, it was like, how do we change this system? Because this
Yeah.
system is broken. It doesn't, it's misdesigned, and it's
Yes.
creating more trauma on the folks who need the help the most.
Yes. But you know what? Don't beat yourself up though, Eduardo. Do you know
Very good.
why? Because the thing is, we're accustomed to, and because I work I founded a nonprofit too. And we're so accustomed to having these intake forms, right? Because that's what it is, because that's what the granting system, whether it's from the profit or the government or whatever, right? Requires of us, right? So then
Yes.
and so then we kind of fall lock in step with that, because it's otherwise we don't have, we're suffering from inequitable access because we need to supply
Right.
that to even try to attempt to get a grant, right? And so I'm with you. It's like we
Have
just
Have
need
you
to.
seen? I'm sorry. Have you seen that movie Parasite? That there was a
No, but
Korean
someone
movie that
talked to
came
me
out.
about it. I should watch it. You're
You
the
should.
third person in less than a month that has told me to about this. Uh-huh. Go
Okay,
ahead.
watch this movie, and it is a it's a metaphor for essentially like what we are doing to the folks who apply for financial aid in our organization, which we got rid of that system, and I'll tell
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
about how we're doing in financial aid
Please.
now. But
Yes.
what we were doing to folks was just a microcosm of what foundations do to us.
Yes.
And in that movie, it's the poor people who are fighting against each other for the benevolence of the rich. And
Right.
essentially, like one will, try to put the other one down because they're just trying to survive.
Yes.
And that's what we do. We
Mm-hmm.
we have to do all these things as a nonprofit if you're completely funded, and that's the only thing you survive on, which we don't,
Yes.
thankfully. But then you have to do these things for the benevolence of that corporation or that foundation who's funding you, which means they
Yes.
have all these things you have to do. So you do it onto the person below you, the person who has less fortune than you.
Yeah.
It's the
Not
same
because, but not
thing.
because you want to. It's because we're wired to execute that way and not pause for a minute and say, but wait a second, am I contributing to the problem? You don't even realize it because it's already become second nature. But as
It's
you mature in your equity journey, right? And you
Yeah.
realize you beat yourself up. And I know, because that's why I'm like, don't beat yourself up, right? At
Thank
least you woke up and changed it, right? And so, and not only that, you're serving as a model of how to do it, right?
you.
So these things that it's like, oh, it's so hard to do, it's so hard. No, 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 because we're doing it, right? So how did you change it? How did you switch it around so that way the access is more direct and you're really creating these pathways to opportunities to flourish?
Well, one of the first thing that we did actually, and again, this is when we talk about the good things that are birthed out of terrible times, right? The pandemic.
Mhm, mhm.
Pandemic hit March. Our summer programs start in June. We knew, and we knew families were going to need help immediately. People were losing their jobs. Like
Mhm.
it was scary,
That,
right?
yeah.
And we said, wait a minute, we can't have a system where families are applying for financial aid and having to wait weeks or months to get approved. We need instant access. People need access to programs right away. So we said, wait a minute, what if we do something just revolutionary? What if we just break this system completely? What if we just, right next to our price, we put what we called an honor code, and it's essentially a discount code. It's a promo code, but we called it an honor code. And we put an honor code for 80% off and an honor code for 50% off. So, and we said, essentially, if families need financial aid, they can enter in one of these honor codes immediately. They don't go hunting online for it or anything. It's literally right next to the price. If you need financial aid, just enter in a code. And we made them big enough so that we said, this is not like a nice to have discount, not like a 15 or 20% discount. This is like, hey, I need help. I'm going to use it. And if I don't need help, I'm going to leave it for somebody else who does.
Right.
And so we changed the dynamic where we are not the benevolent ones, right, in that situation. We're not the ones granting aid to somebody else. We are letting people choose whether they want to use a code or not, whether they need it or not. And now parents have the power, right? Families have the power. Whoever those caregivers have, they have the power to decide whether they want to use it, whether they want to use 50 or 80. And I will tell you, it was amazing. And people were like, well, but someone could abuse this. What if somebody doesn't need it? And we say, okay, well, if somebody abuses it, maybe they do. But I think overwhelmingly, people are good. People are honest. People will not take advantage of it. And let's see how it rolls. Worst case scenario, we're going to go down. Like worst case, and you know what? We might be going down anyway. So if I'm going to go down, I might as well go down holding my values, doing something I believe in, as opposed to like going down, on the backs of somebody else. So let's just put it out there. Let's see what happens. And it was amazing. 70% of the people who enrolled in our online programs that year, in the middle of the pandemic, 70% did not use the code. They just paid the full price. 30% of families used one of those codes, the 50 or 80%, which is about what we would expect in terms of our families using codes. The really amazing thing was, out of the 70% that paid the full price, 20% of those donated more on top of what they were paying for camp, because they wanted to help cover the cost of what they knew we were giving away in financial aid, plain and simple. So, and actually the donations helped cover a lot of the cost of the financial aid we were giving away, completely without a form, without anything.
You just made me cry. That is so awesome. That is just so awesome, because you realize that people are good. So your hypothesis was proven, that people are good and they want to support and they recognize their place of privilege, and so that is so awesome. Oh my God, I'm a mess. I think that is a testament to really forget about thinking outside the box. It's just creating a new box, right? If it doesn't work, you need to know when to pause and just say, hey, this isn't working. Like you said, we could easily be gone by tomorrow with the way things are going, right? Because it was scary. I remember March 2020. I think everybody remembers March 2020, right? From a nonprofit and also for a business, from a business standpoint. And to think that you had that courage, right, to explore something that most people say, okay, he's lost his marbles. This guy has completely, right? They have just lost their marbles. But yes, in essence, I think people want to do the right thing. And I think that they recognize too your heart, right? I think they say that I think it might have even reinforced their sense of alignment with what you're trying to do with EDMO. Yes, without a doubt.
And I think that's one of the things that binds us to each other and to our customers or whoever we're serving, the family we're serving, is our values. And I think that's one of the big things when you're doing equity work. You put out, what are your values? And a lot of times we hear corporations talk about values, but like, what's your personal values? What are the values of your organization? How are you communicating those to your families? You're absolutely right. We were real with our families. Like we were just telling them how it is and why we're doing this. and putting it out there and anchoring ourselves in the values of the organization. And I think when you connect with people with mutual values, you allow a space for integrity to happen. And that's the
Yes.
thing. Like a lot of us, we profess our values, and hey, we all do that. We're all out of integrity at some point, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like, hey, we're walking like saints over here. Like I'm out of integrity like on a regular
Yeah.
basis. But when you know what your values are, at least a little alarm goes off, right? And you're like, I'm
Yes.
out of integrity right now, and so you're like,
Yeah.
okay, what do I got to do to get back into integrity? And
Yeah.
I think if you start designing systems from values and you start communicating those values and you really hold yourself to those values, then you start making real systemic change. Then you start breaking some of these things that we're just kind of born into, and we're like, oh, this is just the way it is. These are the systems. This is how it works. This is how you're supposed to do it. But when you actually step back and wait a minute, does this really align? Does this feel good inside of me? Like, does this align with my values? No.
Mhm.
Okay, then I need to figure out a way to make it align. And I think when you're in alignment, then it allows other folks to be in alignment with their values.
Yes, totally. And the thing is, you just debunked this idea that reallocating opportunity or resources or shifting the way things are done or eliminating processes and policies and like loopholes or these structures, right? Um, it's not detrimental because it was a win-win-win for all parties involved. You grew, you saw more donations, right? And so this is also almost like an opportunity to showcase what can be done at the corporate level too. We have all of these companies, for example, that have promised, to increase their diversity, equity, and inclusion spending and procurement and all of this stuff, right? But as minority entrepreneurs, sometimes, you have to get the certification, get all of these things to qualify you, right? As worthy to even speak, right, in these spaces. And the thing is that they're just barriers. It's embedded in the system. So how do you learn, and this, I know this is a topic that you love. How do you learn to be an equity ally, whether you're in government, nonprofit, or in the corporate sector, right? How what does that look like, and how do you go about learning to be an equity ally?
Wow. Well, uh, that was an answer I was searching for really wholeheartedly, probably about 5 years ago, when I realized how badly
Yes.
we were misusing this word. And I'd say, one of the first things you can do is go out and look for resources in your community to help you to create a community of other folks who are kind of like-minded. One of the communities I'm a part of is called Radical Transformational Leadership. It's led by Dr. Monica Sharma. She's worked for the UN for like 24 years. She does these workshops. They're virtual now. I can maybe send out the email link or something, whatever you send to folks after this. But she kind of walks you through these like 40 something tools that you can use as a leader to build equity in your community and practice equity yourself. But one of the
Mm-hmm.
first things that she does is has folks identify what are your values, what are your core universal values, and she calls them universal
Mm-hmm.
because they have to be something that anybody in any country and any continent could relate to. And then once you establish what your core values are, so like I learned to say, my name is Eduardo, and I stand for equity, authenticity, and courage for myself and all others. And so once I know that, and it's important that it's just not just for you, right? It's for everyone else. Then how
Mm-hmm.
do I start designing systems internally in my organization, the things that I control? Like, how can I start to develop systems that reflect those values? And a lot of the things that,
Mm-hmm.
these kind of like business, your input outputs and your measurable outcomes, like there's these systems, but if you don't frame them through the lens of your values and in having integrity around your values, then you can misdesign stuff. You can design stuff that's very efficient, but it's also, or maybe not efficient, but that creates inequity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're designing from your values, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, now I'm going to make change. And so, and then you got to, learn how to talk to folks and get folks to make committed requests. there's things that you can do, like again, these little tools, like she has like 46 little tools that you can do to practice creating equity.
Yes, I think that a big issue that needs to be addressed is the lack of representation, right? Of diverse people with diverse views,
Yeah.
identities and perspectives, right? In these positions of authority, if you will, in government, the big nonprofits, right, and in the corporate sector, and that's changed somewhat. I feel like in the last couple of years, you see more salt and pepper, right, in the C level, in the C suites, but not enough yet to
Yeah.
affect change, because I feel that the values, right, are also, we started this whole conversation about how children, right, are nuanced by contextual factors like their culture, their heritage, their background, their, the zip code that they were born in, the resources that they've had access to, right, their ethnic even identity, and so I think that translates also into the face of a lot of these organizations, that I think that they profess that they want to do the right thing, but perhaps having more people of diverse backgrounds in their leadership will allow for equity to be realized, right? And to really understand what allyship is, with that equity lens, because it's not just I'm saying, oh, I support or I'm working on myself, but it's really executing so that way people have an equal stake in the future of our country and of the world, of the global economy, right?
Well, again, I can only speak from my experience and what I've seen us trying to do at EDMO. We are aware, look, we don't have enough people of color in our leadership team, right? Like I'm Latino, but I'm white passing. So, I have a certain privilege that when, I've never had to be worried about being stopped by the police and because of the color of my skin, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even though I culturally have Latino in me, I have a privileges that I've been born into as well. And I think some of that introspect, first you have to be able to do that and identify like what is your identity, and then how other, how do you present in the world and understand the privileges that come with that, and then recognize like, wait a minute, like who are the people at the table and are they representative of the folks that we're working with in the field? Like so for the
Mm-hmm.
families that we served in our programs that are funded, they're primarily Latino, African American, Pacific Islander, and do we have folks that look like the kids who are serving in our decision making rooms, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so while we are really diverse up to a certain level in our organization, we're not quite as diverse as I would like us to be at the executive level. So what can you do when it's not like I can't just make up a position or something, right? Like, and I don't want to do that. I want to do it like in a way that's arbitrary, right? But what I
Mm-hmm.
can do is I can invite more people into the decision-making process for now until I can grow my executive team.
Yes.
So have more representation at the table, have our region managers at the table, have our instructors, our curriculum folks at the table, have more people there so that we're having an equitable decision-making process where it's not a couple white passing people or folks at the table making a decision. Let's have everyone together and everyone has equal say in the decision of the organization.
Yeah. Yeah, because this is it's a marathon, right? It's like this journey. It's like you start small, and so then you have to look at the people in your circles that can help you bring to fruition this vision, right? And so it just is what it is at the beginning, but as you grow, if you're mindful, you're able to create that pipeline and really tap into the talent that's in the broader community, and you build these circles that the circle keeps on expanding and expanding, so you get to meet parents and other leaders in diverse communities, and so then that's how organically and with more intentionality you're able to grow, right? Representation in the decision making process. Yes, absolutely. I know, like, for example, a hospital here in Central Florida, when they first came in, obviously they're coming from out of state, and to have a presence here. And they and the leadership obviously was, very white, but something that I was very impressed about, how they approached, every decision, every hiring decision that they made, was that they did, like a round table of families, of heads of households, that represented the community. They looked at the demographics of the community. So talk about equity, right? Of the
Nice.
community, and said, okay, you are going to interview everyone we hire. We're creating this panel of
Beautiful.
parents that represent it is a children's hospital, right? Of parents of the very children that we're going to serve, so that way you can be our sounding board and really tell us yay or nay, and vet who we're hiring, to run this joint, right? And so I think it was very effective, and it permeates when you walk into this hospital. Oh my gosh, it's like a five-star hotel experience. Like, really, for anybody that walks in that door gets treated with kid gloves and complete, like, star treatment, right? Because it's at the forefront of what they're trying to do, and it's that everybody gets treated, with the same level of medical care, right? And follow up. It doesn't matter who you are. And actually, if you're not able to pay the bill, that's okay too, right? That, like, they have that embedded into, their how they operate. So it's great. So it goes, so it is possible, right? It is possible to
And,
try something different. Mm-hmm.
and I mean, and that's like changing that narrative of, people think, oh, because you're doing equity, you're going to sacrifice quality. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
that hospital story is exactly the point that you actually, how do you change that narrative? You're actually
Yeah.
increasing the quality. You're increasing the reputation of that organization, of that of that hospital. People trust that because you will give equal care and wonderful care to everyone, you will give wonderful care to me, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
an institution that says like, oh, well, maybe you might not get a good care here, or maybe, but
Yeah.
maybe you will if you have enough resources. And then, like, suddenly people don't trust you, right? People don't
Yes.
like, there's a misalignment there. I don't know what I'm going to get with these folks. Or, you're starting to go on fear, and people having a fear going into your business. And there's a situation where you're creating a community of trust, with
Yes.
your customers, right?
Absolutely. So quick question. I know that social emotional learning is a thing that's not new. And there's actually, I think this month or this week, right? That it's
Yes, March 11th. It's Social
yes.
Emotional Learning Day. It's a national day now. So there'll be lots of events. If you go to sel4us.org, you can learn about more events and get involved with SEL, in your community. But definitely something to take a look at, and see if, just practice some SEL skills that day. Maybe be a little bit more mindful on March 11th around responsibility, empathy, collaboration, initiative. Like, think about some of those soft skills that you might be practicing that day, and being kind of intentional about them.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And then last but not least, so what are your plans for EDMO coming up? I mean, and this whole virtual experience, and do you collaborate with other nonprofit organizations nationwide to be able to, give access to this programming, especially the virtual, because I'm assuming after 2 years you've got this down pat, right? So talk to me about plans coming now for the summer.
Right. So definitely any family, if you got a child and between pre-K to 8th grade, go to edmo.org, and you can find one of our folks to either do one-on-one tutoring and mentoring, or join one of our group classes. Online, we have online summer camps. If you want to do an online summer experience, you can reach it from anywhere in the country. If you're looking for a partner to bring in-person programs like EDMO to your community, especially if you work at a school district, or maybe you have a network of schools, we are open to moving into other geographic regions, as long as we've got to have enough sites to make it, to make a healthy ecosystem of support. So, but if you have a part of a system, an education system, and you're interested, please feel free to reach out. That's most of what I do right now, is meet with school districts and other schools and organizations, and help develop partnerships.
That's fantastic. So you're like in the biz dev aspect now, right? And do
Yeah.
you get to interact with the kids? Because I know that that's how you started, right? With the day-to-day lived experiences. Because I'm sure
Oh,
that it must be so rewarding to watch their faces light up and just engage with each other.
oh yeah. Every summer, I try to make it to about at least 10 to 15 of our sites during the course of the summer. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's what makes all the rest of the year worth it to go and
Yeah.
see the programs in action. And I will still get up there and bring out my old camp counselor songs, and I can do a mean boom chicka boom. If any of y'all know that one, that's my favorite. I challenge any staff this summer to a boom chicka boom off, and yeah, I love it, love it.
This is fantastic, Eduardo. I mean, leadership like yours and a vision also, like to break the parameters of what we understand things should be. I think is what really we should all be, pausing and thinking about, and because it is possible. And I know that 18 years seems to you like, oh my gosh, right? All of this time, but look at all of the lives you've impacted, right? And this shift that you also had, right? It's like that lived experience to say, listen, to be able to share with others, right? That's I think that's powerful to say. Even we in this journey, right, of trying to do the right thing, have had to calibrate as we go along, because no one's perfect, right? But it's all about where your heart is and what
Yeah.
you want to do for others. That matters at the end of the day. And so we know that you come from a place of caring and really just wanting to improve the livelihood and the opportunities for all of these young people. And thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much for lifting our story and creating spaces like this for other leaders too to share their stories.
Absolutely. And we'll be talking soon. I'm going to reach out to you, okay, to see what we
All
can
right.
do over here in Orlando, because we need EDMO. We need EDMO. Okay.
Yeah. Come on down, edmo.org. Come on down.
Okay. Okay. Sounds great. Thank you so much, Eduardo.
All right. Thank you.
This concludes this episode of I Have Something to Say. We want to thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to tell your friends about us. We're on Spotify and iTunes as well. There's more to come next week. And remember, if you have something to say, it's time to speak up.